Hey guys, subscribe for daily content, and if you're shopping for gear, make sure you check out the description for the newest items at some of the very best online retailers. There's also links for some of the items that I personally recommend. Thanks!
What's going on YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got a very interesting knife review slash knife overview to share with you guys. This is the Olamic Cutlery Rainmaker, and I've actually got two of them here because I got some emails mixed up and said yes to two different people who wanted me to loan me Rainmaker models, but this worked out really well. There's some really interesting details here between these two, and I think people will find it very interesting. So thank you very much to this person here. On Instagram, you can see RS300C, and then his Discord name for sending, I believe, this one. And then to Tyler for sending the other one. Very cool. It's because of people like them that I'm able to bring you guys daily knife content. It's also because of my generous patrons. Thanks so much for supporting me. You can find my Patreon link down below in the description. And please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. We're going to get into some very interesting details here. But first, some quick specs. Overall length of the Rainmaker. This is a big knife. Coming in at 9.5 inches overall. Maybe a little bit more than that. Almost 9 3/4 inches overall. Blade length is coming in at, if I want to measure it down to here, we are looking at roughly 4.5 inches of blade, maybe a little bit less, 4.4. The cutting edge is 4 inches on the dot. These knives will be linked right down below. They are very expensive. There's quite a few variants of these, so stick around and I'll give you guys the details on pricing and stuff like that. But yes, you can absolutely get the Rainmaker right now. Link them down below. Let's go ahead and do some size comparisons up against the Ontario Rat Model 1 and the Ontario Rat Model 2. So you can see here, huge, big, long knife, absolutely. This is obviously not going to be legal in a lot of areas, so make sure you check your local laws before you pick something like this up. But yeah, big knife. How about up against the Spyderco PM2 and the Spyderco Para 3? Once again, I think it's obvious we're looking at a large knife. And we'll do two more size comparisons up against the Benchmade Griptilian, or in this case, the Ritter Hogue, and its little brother, the Mini Griptilian. There you go, big knife. How about carry profile? Let's do thickness up against the Spyderco Para 3. You can see here it's really not all that thick. In fact, it's like a hair thinner than the Spyderco Para 3. Length and height up against the PM2 and Para 3. This does have a flipper tab, but you can see here it's really just a long, skinny, slender thing. It is a little bit longer. It's quite a bit longer than the PM2, right? But nowhere near as tall as either of them, even including the flipper tab, right? The PM2 and Para 3 are still quite a bit taller thanks to those holes there. So it's really going to be length, you know, that's going to cause some people to say no thank you. Here, incoming with the jokes. The blade stock thickness on this guy, I'm going to guess it's 140 thousandths or so. Nope, okay, it's about 130. It says 133. It's probably about 135. There you go. Let's take a look at the inside real quick. We're looking at titanium and, you guessed it, M390. There is no milling on the inside. I find that interesting. Some of these are going to have holes milled in them, like this guy. See, they're going to weigh a little bit less. I'll give you an example of that right now. Get out my scale, which is right there. Fantastic. So the guy that's titanium with a little bit of, you know, patterning in there, this guy's coming in at 5.43 ounces, which is still pretty impressive considering how big the knife is. This guy with the holes in it is coming in the same? Okay, I thought for sure it would weigh less. Why does this one weigh so much more? Or, I'm sorry, even considering that there are holes milled. I have no idea, because these two are identical in terms of dimensions and everything like that. Even the blade stock, I mean, everything is exactly the same. So maybe the holes don't make that much of a difference. I am curious as to why they don't mill these out. I think that's probably a good idea, just to achieve a little bit better balance. Yeah, they pretty much weigh exactly the same. I'm gonna guess there's still gonna be some slight variance depending on which model you pick up, right? So there you go. Do with that information what you will. Let's go ahead and do the hardware check. You can absolutely get my tools down in the description now and in my Amazon store. Feel free to check that out. These are extremely recommendable and very inexpensive. The pivot screw is going to be a T8. Now this is the same with both. I have checked them. T8 for the pivot, and all of your body screws, including the lock bar insert, everything like that, are going to be T6. They're fairly minimal. In fact, everything, you know, 2 body screws, that's going to be it. That's the same on each of these guys, right? So Not going to be difficult to take apart. Very, very easy to take apart. Simple frame lock. All right, so before we get going here, let me point out that one of these guys, in fact, it's going to be this guy right here. This one was made in 2020, 9/4/2020. The guy on top was made February 25th of 2021. As far as fit and finish and seating of the hardware and everything like that, how the blades were ground, right, the appearance of everything looks identical. These are made in the United States. They are very, very high quality. We have two different finishes here. We have a satin finish, which looks fine. And then we have a high satin finish, which is not quite a mirror polish, but it's really, really nice. Olamic Cutlery has always done a great job. I've always been impressed with Olamic Cutlery. Looking back to the one that I had back in 2013 or 2014, I can say that both of these are quite a ways up in terms of overall quality. Little things like the final cutting bevel, right? The detent, stuff like that. The one that I had, it was a full-size Wayfarer, so a custom or semi-custom. All of these are custom / semi-custom depending on how you define that, right? These are very expensive knives and a lot of handwork goes into them, but there are machining elements as well. So however you define that is whatever, it is what it is. But these are a step up from there, both of them, absolutely. The one thing that I can tell the difference in is the action. This one right here feels very similar to other Olamic cutlery knives that I've handled recently, all except a very new busker. All Olamics kind of feel like, you know, medium heavy to heavy detents, nice snap, right? Good fit and finish all the way around. Everything's fine, but the action feels, it's always felt a little tight, right? Like, okay, that's no big deal because it's consistent on the inside. That's what I've said before with like 247s. Consistency is there, it just feels a little bit tight, so you don't get that satisfying drop shuttiness, but that's okay. It's not as good as like where Hinderer's at, nowhere near what where Koenig is at, and that's a fair point of reference considering the Koenig Arius is in the same ballpark, right? But decent enough. There were enough other elements with a lot of Olamic cutlery knives where I was like, all right, the action's not my favorite thing in the whole world, but it's all right. This guy is much better. The detent is lightened up to the point where it's not quite so oof when you fire it, and it is very smooth on the inside. Now, this is still not drop shut, but you guys have heard me say before, I could care less if it's drop shut. What I want is a nice, smooth, controlled action, consistency on the inside, so I'm not feeling bump, 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 lump, bump, bump, lump. I don't want to feel that. I want it to be glass, nice and smooth. That's the case here. Nice and smooth. Not completely and totally fall shut, but very smooth, very consistent. The detent's lightened up to the point where that is a joy to flip. What that tells me is that over the last, well, the one was made in September, so it's almost been a year since this guy was made. Let me do my math here. It was just a few months later, something different. And I've felt other newer Olamics, like that busker, feel kind of the same way. Must be doing something different on the inside of the pivot. This feels like not just an odd variance, right? I mean, I'm sure there's always going to be odd variants out there, but this feels like an improvement inside the pivots. This is one of the newest Olamics that I've handled to date. And it feels like there's a pretty substantial improvement inside of the pivot, the surfaces in there, and the detent strength, which is now, this one was a little bit, this is a little hard for such a large, I don't know, it felt kind of, you can see I'm slipping off of it a little bit. This guy feels a lot better. So I think if you've been hesitant or heard maybe in the past that Olamic cutlery knives were subpar in the internals in the action department, to me, and you know, with this guy and the busker that I handled here recently, I think this is evidence that they might have changed how they do the pivot internals. It just feels way, way better. So this is a big knife. Let's get into the review of the actual knife. I just wanted to make sure that that was clear. But the knife has an enormous amount of real estate to engage the handle. You have one specific spot they really want you to put your index finger in there, but because the knife is so long, I can actually still get a full forefinger grip choked back. There is an area up here that is a substantial forward choil. And this guy is the same on this guy. Yeah. Lots of room. So you have position 1, position 2, and in my opinion, a third position if your hands are the same as mine. Why you would need to choke back, I don't know, but it's there if you want to. Something I really like about this particular model over other Olamics that I've seen really have a lot of crazy curves. The 247 has that weird sort of gunner grip thing. The Busker's kind of an S shape, and there's a couple other models that are just kind of all over the place, and that's fine. Some people like that. I like the straight lines of this guy. Love the compound blade, love the harpoon blade. As is the case with all Olamic cutlery knives, pretty much every single knife is different. They come in a wide variety of different patterns. For the titanium, you can see here we have this sort of rock pattern, and this one's got the frosty finish, which I really like. They've done countless different types of things like that. They also do inlay work, different colors of anodization, more or less polished, different colors of hardware, right? Different finishes on the blade. Lots and lots and lots of different stuff. We're talking about beyond hinderer level customization, but you need to pick it up that way from the factory. Doesn't have the same sort of modular, like you can buy all the individual parts like Hinderer does. But that's cool. You can get it the way that you want right then and there. I believe all of them are M390 right now. Both of these guys are going to be M390. You can see there on the blades. But yeah, this is really good looking. I like this a lot more. I don't need a nearly 10-inch knife for EDC. I would say hardly anybody does, but if you like larger knives, this is definitely going to be something that you'll enjoy. And it's easier to carry than a lot of larger blades because it is so long and slender. So as long as you've got deep enough pockets, I don't think it'll be that bad. And 5.5 ounces, well, that's gonna be really heavy for a lot of people. It's still within my kind of like preference range, 4 to 6.5 or so ounces, right? So that wouldn't really bother me. I tend to not like such a large blade, such a long blade, because I don't need that much cutting edge, but I still appreciate how well this is balanced, even without it being milled out on the inside. You can see the balance is right there where you're gonna put your index finger. I think if they milled it out, the balance obviously would be more towards the pivot, which would be more ideal, but it still feels incredibly wieldy, for such a long object. The blade looks fantastic. I love the little Olamic Cutlery logo right there. Got a little bit of an inconsistency, kind of I guess we'll call that a smile back there. It's present on this guy too. Not so much, right? I imagine that's going to be more or less the same. It's not really that big of a deal. Everything up here looks nice and consistent, really good. The edge is nice and sharp, comes down to a thin edge, especially right here around this hollow ground area, and then it's flat ground up here. That's nice. Does that offer some sort of utilitarian advantage? No, not really, but it sure does look good. The blades look incredible. There's a flat carried out about 85% the length of the blade. Not a super thick blade stock, and it does get very thin out here at the tip, so I wouldn't go stabbing this into anything. It'll cut, it'll slice. It's not going to be as slicey as an open L. This is one of those knives where, yeah, it is made to be used. It is plenty durable, but there's an air of more of a decorative, I want to be careful with terms like decorative, because when I say that, it leads people to believe they're not actually made to be used. They're absolutely made to be used. You can absolutely take this thing out and use it and expect it to function for years and years and years. It's very durable, right? But there's some embellishments, right, to make it look good, some extra things that they've done to make these knives exceptionally beautiful. And while, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, I find this one to be a lot more appealing than some of the other models. And it's really nice, especially this purple one, to find out that, this action is what I expect from a modern, knife in this. And again, a lot of people are going, I'm not going to buy it unless it's completely and totally drop shut. Drop shut action does not define the overall quality of the knife. I think a smooth, controlled action like this, it's nice. I mean, it's just a few wiggles, and we're at an angle here, keep in mind, but it's nice and consistent on the inside. I really like that. The flipper tab is knocked down enough, right? I'm not going to call it sharp, but it's sharper than if they had done a little bit more. Edges up here, this is a little bit sharp. I wish that they would knock that down a little bit more. Same thing with up here. That's kind of catching my fingernails, as you can see, right? But it's all right. Depends on the finish that you get, obviously. But yeah, really good. The edges around the scales, those on both knives, absolutely, completely and totally knocked down. I really like how they do this sort of where they polish the bowls, and then on this guy they've anodized it bronze. It really, really looks good. Love the backspace. You can see that there's variance in the backspacer too. You can get backspacers that are heavy contrast to whatever the finish is or the color on the scales. You can get backspacers that basically are a continuation of the exact same thing. It's fine. There's a million options. There are so many. Obviously, the more complicated, right, it's going to cost you more money, but it's really impressive that they do this. I like how the hardware looks. I like where it's seated. It's also, I'll point out again, it is very comfortable. I mean, it's not an absolute like, oh my gosh, ergonomic masterpiece, but there's so much room on this guy and the pocket clip is flat. It's really comfortable. Yeah, you could use this guy with or without gloves and you're probably going to be just fine. I think the lanyard hole is in exactly the right place. It's not being prioritized over the clip, and while I wouldn't call the clip a deep carry clip by any means, considering how much of the knife is actually in your pocket, I'm going to call that about medium. It does have a very simple, straightforward popsicle stick style clip, which actually works with this knife because the entire thing is kind of like a big popsicle stick. So that's okay. It does have a steel lock bar inserts, which you may or may not be able to see. Let me get my flashlight. I don't know. Can we see in there? You can see the lip of it, right? It definitely has a steel lock bar insert that doubles as the over travel stop. Both of these guys are perfectly centered, which has been the case with every Olamic knife that I've ever handled. So that's great. This guy seems to be locking up. It's kind of hard because where it actually engages is kind of quite a ways in there. Maybe 20% on this guy, and this guy that's just a little older is honestly pretty much in the exact same place. There is a little bit of shouldering, and there's a very large stop pin back there to engage with the thing of the blade. They look to be pretty much the same. So these knives are in the same price tier. Like if you just want a basic one, and that's going to be like tumbled titanium with a satin blade, it's probably going to come in at between $500 and $550. If they all felt like this guy, I'd be like, yeah, but these are nice, and generally speaking, a lot of work goes into them. You could say $550, you can get a Hinderer that's got perfect action for $425, not in full titanium. If you want a full titanium Hinderer, you're gonna have to buy a Hinderer, and then you're gonna have to buy a scale for $200. And yes, that's what a titanium scale costs directly from Hinderer or directly through the retailers that sell them if you can find them, turning that knife into a $625 knife for, basically stonewashed titanium and stonewashed M390. So you're getting full titanium with these guys for about $500 to $550. I think let's say $525. It's kind of hard to say because they charge for every little, like if it's like holes or it's polished or tumbled or polished bladed right in the basic area. Just in the basic versions of these knives, there's variants like that. And then the more complicated they get, the more expensive they are. So given the action on this guy, I do love. This guy is definitely a much better looking knife, but this one feels better. This Rainmaker is exactly where I'd want a high-end, ultra high-end production or semi-custom or custom, right? Yeah, we'll call this semi-custom. US knife. That's exactly how I would want something like this to feel in this territory. This is very good, and it's nice because this is such a cool, big old long knife. I'm normally not, normally I'm just kind of like, oh, it's neat that it's a big long knife, and then I'm kind of like, well, I'm not really into these big old long pokey looking guys, but this is just good. I like how long this is. You really have to like this, right? You really have to like how this looks to go for it, because I'm not going to tell you, other than tasks that require a longer cutting edge, there's not much of a reason to carry a larger. Most of the time, a knife like this is going to do everything you need it to do, and then some, right? You don't really need that much longer blade, but this is a good looking one. It's nice and balanced and has, again, if you want to pay more money, you're going to get more out of the appearance. You can kind of pick and choose, and there's so many to pick from right now. I like this a lot. Had I just handled this one and not this one, my conclusion here would be I love the custom finish work, the overall fit and finish, how the blade looks, the finish on the blade, the finish on the titanium, seating in the hardware, centering, lockup, all that stuff is great. And by the way, these are completely and totally solid, no blade play up, down, left, to right. But I would say the action is kind of lacking. It's kind of the action that I would expect from a knife in 2014, 2015. Okay, not great. The action on this guy is really good. I like it a lot. This is absolutely a contender for, alongside other knives, or a heavy competitor alongside other knives, that are in that territory. We're talking Hinderer knives, Chris Reeve, the lower end of Koenig, right, and others, absolutely. As the price goes higher, that changed a little bit. But I think the base versions, if you want a more fancy or embellished version of one of these, you're going to pay more, and that's going to be up to you. But as far as the base version of this knife goes, it's coming in somewhere between $500 and $550. I think it's very competitive. And I love I think the finish work on the blade and you know, fit and finish and everything like that is really, really good. I think these knives, Olamic Cutlery in general, is often overlooked now in 2021. We got a lot of people waiting for some of these other competitors. I would say give them a second glance. If you don't like this guy, maybe you will like the Busker or the 247, right? If this knife is any indication of where their action is at right now, everything else has always been great. The action has been the only thing where I'm kind of like, yeah, it's okay, it's not perfect. But if the action's like this guy on their newer stuff, yeah, I'm gonna say go for it. So this knife is not going to be recommendable for everybody based on the fact that it is so long. It's a really big, long knife. But is it a healthy competitor? Well, yeah, you just have to like a longer knife. So I want to make that clear. But as far as the Rainmaker goes in general, if you like a larger knife, I can absolutely recommend this. US made, right? A lot of extra work going into stuff like this. It's very impressive. I do like these a lot. So I think that's going to be pretty much it. Thanks again to the gentleman who sent these in for review. Like I said, I will link the Rainmaker right down below so you can explore that if you want to. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do of course have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on that Metal Complex logo right there and subscribe because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.